Most people suck at communication. Yes, I am talking to you. The reason for this is because what it means to go first is being vulnerable, to being the first to say, hey, this can be different. You choose you put the armor down, because it doesn't have to be a war. What you believe in your perspective is unlikely to be the full truth. And when you start with the story I'm telling myself, you allow the other person to, we create boundaries, great, but we also have to learn how to communicate that and ensure that that safety is there for you and for the other people in your life. But a lot of people put the boundaries in place for themselves and only worry about their own safety. But it's also important to ensure. Welcome to Life by 8, your blueprint for designing your ultimate life. I'm Rebecca Grugan, your architect on this journey to building a life fully lived. Using our 8 Pillars to Human Wellness framework, we'll explore how to transform your everyday from ordinary to extraordinary. So let's go. This episode is all about, those conversations you're not having and how they're actually affecting you more than actually having the conversation, right? Many of us growing up, at some point, we got told that kids shouldn't be heard, that we should be quiet, that we should listen and only talk when asked. And we started to doubt ourselves. We started to, we have these internal thoughts and we have this voice inside our head that, took on all of that, took on this whole, if I'm too loud, then maybe I need to be quiet. If what I have to say is not valuable, then what's the point of me saying it? And so communication is not only the words that you speak, it's also your body. Your body speaks so much more than even the words that you say. And in another episode, we'll go into body language and all of those things and the statistics behind it. But what I want to talk about today is why the conversations you're avoiding having are affecting the quality of your life. And so you may be in a relationship or growing up, you saw your parents do this. It's, somebody's at the dishes, they're like banging the dishes in the sink. It's like, right? And they're like not saying anything, but the energy and the tension in the house is like full on negative. It's like, what is she or he saying? What are they wanting the other person to feel or know, but they're not using words to say it? And that might just be a one-off, right? But if you think about, we do this so often in so many different ways to try to communicate or say what we want without saying it. But we're human and we are storytellers. We will make things mean stuff, even if we don't actually have all the information. Right? So this is why communication is so important. But the reason so many of us are shit at it is because we don't actually know how to do it. And so when, somebody's pissed off at each other and they give the cold shoulder and they just walk past, or there's people who their partner comes home in the driveway and they get up out of their seat really quickly from just chilling out to make it look like they're doing something because they're worried about getting in trouble. These things are happening day in, day out in so many people's lives that they are unconsciously aware of the impact it's having on not only themselves, but on the family unit, on their work colleagues, on people around them. And so you may have heard things or people talk about toxic culture or, toxic positivity, all this sort of stuff, right? It's like, let's just get back to the basics. What makes us human, and one of the skills that we have or the ability to do, is communicate in a language that other people can understand. I mean, animals do this. They make sounds and they can understand each other. Whale sounds are incredibly brilliant and beautiful if you would ever go down that rabbit hole, right? To see how they communicate to each other. But because we are meaning-making machines and we have the brains that we have, when we don't say what we mean, people will misconstrue or not have the ability to make sense of what we mean. And so we actually have to start to learn how to communicate, how our words create a reality, and how we can actually change the world one conversation at a time. And so whatever your childhood was like, there is a reason why you may be shit at communication. And so what happens though is, right, if we're in survival, we learn how to survive. And sometimes that requires us to act or be in a certain way, like giving the cold shoulder, like banging dishes in the sink to make sure that the other person knows that we're shitty, that we came home from work and the dishes weren't done. And this isn't just partnerships, this can be kids in your house. It's your body language and it's the things that you don't say that are affecting your relationships more than what you do say. Because usually when you actually finally say something, you are saying it from a concept with energy that is negative and just gets the other person on the defense, and you're just going up and up and up and up. It doesn't have to be like that, right? But the thing is that you put the energy in a certain way that created the negative defensive state that's happening. And so instead of saying, hey, I'm really glad that you've been able to have a good day at home for you. But when I come home, what it means for me when I come home and all the dishes are everywhere, that just feels like work for me, and I've been working all day. And I just feel really disrespected when that happens. Do you know how different that is than an hour of banging dishes in the sink does to the relationship? They may still get on the defense, right? But they're still learning too. That's their natural reaction. You can't just all of a sudden have the skills, embed it, and expect them to be able to understand it too. And so what I'm really passionate about in the work I do as an NLP trainer, as a work that I do with our clients and as a coach and a speaker and in books that I write, is that I want people to be able to make sense of how to say what they mean. And you could do this in a way that ensures psychological safety for everybody involved. Because some people will get really excited and they'll put boundaries in place, right? Like, got to put boundaries in place. So they create these boundaries. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to say no. But they put boundaries in place, right? And never actually tell the other people in their lives that those boundaries exist now. So they have these boundaries in place, and then they get really shitty when people cross the boundaries and not actually realize that they never told these people that those boundaries were even there. So you have these invisible boundaries that nobody knows about. They actually have to know about them to be able to hold them, right? And so we create boundaries, great. But we also have to learn how to communicate that and ensure that that safety is there for you and for the other people in your life, the other people you're communicating with. This can happen at the boardroom at work. This can happen in the lunchroom. This can happen with your children, your partner. In every communication opportunity you have, ensuring the safety for yourself and others is extremely important. But a lot of people put the boundaries in place for themselves and only worry about their own safety. That's survival, right? That's important. But it's also important to ensure that when you put boundaries in place, people know about it, but you can also respect their boundaries too. And so communication is a two-way street. It's not just about saying what you mean. It's about saying what you mean in a way that ensures the other person involved in the conversation can make sense of them, make sense of those boundaries, make sense of what you mean in a way that they can translate. Just because you say something one way doesn't mean that every other person is going to be able to make sense of what you mean. Yeah, I know. It's starting to get a little bit convoluted and a bit complex, but communication is an extremely important skill that every human needs, but so many of us don't have. And so just imagine for a moment that life was different for you, that you had the ability to talk about what you mean and say what you want, and the conversation, the other person on the other side wasn't defensive. And they could communicate their feelings and, the stories I tell myself is blah, and you and this is how I feel. And it's actually lovely. And you can have conversations about, things an affair that your partner had on you. You can have conversations about somebody who's gambling. You can have really deep conversations about anything. It doesn't have to just be surface level conversation that stays nice. Every interaction can be a nice interaction. Every interaction can have meaning that feels good if you allow yourself to onboard those skills to have that, right? It all comes back down to your intention. So, what does it mean to go first? So, we can have these Mexican standoffs. I'm not sure if you've been in one. got a feeling that you might have been, where it's like, I'm not going to talk first. They can go. Lots of teenagers, this happens at school. They did this. No, but they did this. And it happens in so many different areas of our lives. And it just causes so much more drama and conflict that's actually not needed. And so what it means to go first is the vulnerability piece, right? Being vulnerable to being the first to say, hey, this can be different. This doesn't need to be this way. And so I want to give you an example, a real life example of this in my life a number of years ago. Now, I have quite a complex family, and we have really great relationships based off all the stuff we've had in the past. The fact that the 4 sisters, we all speak to each other, that we see our mum often and we see our grandmother after everything everyone's been put through is phenomenal, right? So when I learnt, when I was embedded in my journey of communication skills, because I wanted to be a better communicator because my staff needed that from me. And I was like, there's got to be a different way. And I really, really loved the relationship that I was in and that I am in. And so when I went and did this training, I learnt how to have a conversation, how to say what I mean and how to go first. And so my grandmother, I love her, is she would come over, and she'd say something like, oh, you must be rolling in it. You've got a new couch. And it's like, inside of me, I'd be like, I'm fucking not rolling. Like, I moved furniture around. It was not a new couch. But why did that trigger me so much, right? But I had to take responsibility for that. And so instead of letting that build up to be a certain type of energy in me, what I actually did was not in that moment because it wouldn't have been safe for her or me, but I allowed her just to hold that space. And then the next day I went around to her house and I said, hey, Nan, the story I'm telling myself is when you say things like, I'm rolling in it because I got a new couch, it really makes me feel bad. And I choose to feel that because it's almost like you're judging me for all of the rewards I'm getting for the work that I'm doing. And I don't feel like that's your intention, but that's the story I'm telling myself. And so I just wanted to say that, and I wanted to hear what you had to say. What are your thoughts? That is literally how the conversation started and went. And I can tell you that our entire relationship has transformed from that initial conversation. From the ability for me not to sit and dwell or create stories that weren't what it meant. I actually asked her for what it means for her. And even if it means that I'm bringing it to her awareness for the first time, the confidence or the vulnerability to go first, it's what's required to get what you want. Because what you want is a life of joy, of happiness. I'm assuming why you're listening to this, right? You want something to be better than it is right now. And it starts with you going first. You choose you put the armor down, and you go first. Because it doesn't have to be a war. It doesn't have to be a standoff. So where in your life are you refusing to go first out of pride, out of ego, out of expectation? Why aren't you going first? What are you waiting for? Because do you realize that we have no guarantee of tomorrow? Do you realize that we're here for a period of time and then we're not? Do you realize that what you think matters to you right now is probably not going to matter in 5 years' time? Do you know that there are people who are on their deathbeds who have held a grudge for 60 years over something they can't even remember? Like, actually, that happens. And so what type of life do you want? Do you want the life where you continually have to carry around and be weighed down by the armor you have up for protection? Or do you actually want to get vulnerable? Do you actually want to feel deep love? Do you actually want to feel deep joy? All of this comes from the ability to communicate. Communicate those desires, communicate those emotions, communicate anything. Because that's what makes us human, right? And so who in your life, where in your life are you not going first? And what would it mean? I wonder what it would mean for you if you actually put the arm down and went first. I know you just had a thought then. I know that you know exactly where you have to start. And that is your unconscious telling you that it's time, right? That you get the chance now. That is your moment. That first thought that you just had, that is exactly where you start. That person, that place, that conversation. Because starting with that one conversation is going to change your life and change the world for everybody. And so, have you not spoken to your mum for years? Have you not spoken to your boss? What is it? You could, at any point, please reach out. I would love, if you've got a conversation you know you need to have, please always reach out to our DMs, because we have resources we can send you for free that will help you have these conversations. You don't have to be on your own. You don't have to be in silence. You don't have to be in isolation. We are here for you. So if you're not sure where to start, unconsciously you do, because you had the thought, right? You get to accept this though. You could also reach out for the help, because it starts with the ability to ask. And if that helps you have a conversation that changes the relationship, changes the energy, not just for you and the other person involved, that all changes the collective conscious. And that is my purpose. And so in those resources we have, and I'll just give you a few tips in this episode, right? Starting with the story I'm telling myself, is the ability to realize and accept the fact that what you believe in your perspective is unlikely to be the full truth, right? It is a story that I am telling myself. And when you start with the story I'm telling myself, you allow the other person to hear and feel that you know that this may not be truth. But you're talking and you're explaining your truth, your story, and you're asking for their version of the story. And it allows the other person in the conversation to not get on the defense about whatever it is that you're saying, right? So the concept of the story I'm telling myself is X, Y, Z, and then asking. The story I'm telling myself, and then asking for the feedback. You get to actually open this dialogue that remains safe for each person involved. And at any point in a conversation, you can always calmly go, hey, I actually need to take some time. Can we circle back to this? Brene Brown talks about this brilliantly in her work, right? Is the ability to communicate and know yourself enough to know when you need it to be paused, so that you can come back to it and come back to that moment and not actually explode, and you can stay regulated. When you know yourself, you know what you need, right? But life is more than yourself. So you need to also be able to see the other perspectives. And just as a side note, the more perspectives that you can hold, the more perspectives you can hold at one time, the greater your capacity, the more you can hold energetically. Love, money, time, freedom, all of it. The more perspectives you can hold at once, the more you can hold in all other areas of your life. And I want to explain that a bit, because I think this helps people understand communication and relationships, because you only see things when you are riled up and you're feeling angry or feeling frustrated and you're not speaking about it and you're in silence and you're ready to explode. You can only see your perspective, right? But the thing is that there is so many different perspectives. And so I'll give you the example. If you were to walk into a shopping center and you were to see a man and a woman fighting, as in just yelling at each other, you can walk in and have your own perspective. Oh, fuck, here I go again. This place I live is always like this. Everybody's so angry at each other. Your perspective. Some people can walk in, have their own perspective, and then also hold the perspective of the woman. And especially because of domestic violence and all of those sort of things that are in our field, in our news, all of those sort of things, right? So a female might hold the perspective of themselves and then what it must be like to be that female right now, right? Then there's people, this is where people they struggle to get past too, is if you can hold your perspective of yours, the woman and the male all at once. Do you know what that changes? That changes everything. Because instead of getting on your own defense and how it's annoying you, you're actually able to start to see things from the potential perspective of the female, but also the male, right? So instead of judgment on one thing, you're holding space for all of it. And then you can start to make sense of and make decisions that that are needed based on the best interests of everyone. See, win-win-win. It's values level 5 if you are in across values levels. If not, so much of our content goes into that, right? So check out our episodes, check out our website. It's all on there. So you've got 3 perspectives. Now, this is where the fucking magic is, right? Is if you can hold your perspective, the female and the male, but then also the shopkeeper perspective, and then the child's perspective, and then the other person over there's perspective. If you can hold all of those perspectives at once, imagine what you can do with that. Imagine the capacity you have to hold all of that and help guide and lead decisions that serve everybody, and how you can diffuse situations, right? But so many of us live in fear. And so fear keeps us in this survival, which means that it's just one thing is to survive, and it's just our perspective. But in communication and in relationships, there's always more than one perspective. And so when you learn how to communicate what you need, your perspective, but are open to receiving and hearing other people's perspectives, you start to learn and you start to create this opportunity where you can walk into a space where there's multiple different people, hold all of those perspectives, and lead and guide that community in with great intention, with beauty, with win-win for everybody. And that's where abundance is. So that's the key. That's the key difference between when it's just about us and when we can actually hold it and be about everybody else. So starting with the story I'm telling myself, that's a magic place when you have a conversation with somebody that you're wanting to bring in. Start with that, because it can get the walls down instead of everybody getting on the defense. But I also want to speak into the fact that, like, is an explosion better than silence? Depends, all right? So for most people, yeah, it is actually. It's better to lose your shit than to stay in silence, because that silence for long term can have long-term damage on the relationship that actually becomes it's irreparable. Whereas an explosion can, at least if you're aware you have it and you allow yourself to settle and then actually speak into it. If you just keep exploding and not apologizing, if you go into explosion and silence, that's what creates eggshells in relationships. So if it's gotten to a point in your relationship or in the conversation you're having and you just lose your shit, allow yourself to do that, and then to come back, ensure that you apologize, and then that you can hold space. And if you can't do that, leave the room, leave the conversation, don't have it. But you need to communicate some way. The silence will kill everything. The banging of dishes will lose so much trust. Say what you mean and mean what you say. And so learning how to do that, building up your ability, your self-trust, will allow others to trust you too. And you may have been somebody who's been known to be explosive in regards to your communication style. That's still repairable. You could still get better at that if you choose. But you have to choose. It's your responsibility, not theirs. As it is theirs to be responsible for the way they communicate and how they feel. And so I know that we've spoken about communication, some tips and some skills, what silence does, and why you got to go first. You don't have to. I'll just say that in there. You going first, you being vulnerable, starting with the story I'm telling myself, opens up the next chapter of your life. It allows you to start writing the story. It allows you to start designing your life. It allows you to start setting intentions, and for other people to know that you have the right intentions, because you're doing it with a responsibility lens. You're not blaming others. And when you start to take control and you take the pen and you start writing that next story, can I just tell you that is where the magic is. That's where the beauty is. That's where the love is. And that's where the compassion comes in. Compassion for self, compassion for others. And you change the trajectory of the life you live and the relationships that you have each and every day. And so these tips, this is about every person you communicate with. It's not just about the love of your life. It is not just about your parenting. It is not just about the workplace. It is every interaction that you have, even with those people that you walk into the shopping centre and you smile at. because it can be as simple as a smile that changes their day. And then that changes the perspective of everybody else. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your perspective, because I always want to hear your perspective, right? Because it's not just about mine. I'm here to serve you. And so let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you need to know. Let me know what you want to know. Let me know more of what you want. Let me know what you want less of. That whole feedback loop, that's a different episode. But let me know, because I'm here. Start practicing. Communicate with me. Let's have a go. Thank you for joining me living life by 8. If this episode hit home, brought value to you in any way, I would love your support with a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite platform too. And don't let your journey end here. Connect with me and my community at Rebecca Grugan on all social platforms. I look forward to going deeper with you on your journey.